What's up, everybody? I am back wrapping up the July 4th month or Independence Day month with G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. And it's been a very, very long time since I've seen this movie. And I put it on the list because, I don't know, a few months ago, I was like, I don't know, I came across the name and I'm thinking like, man, I haven't seen this in a hot while. It would be fun to just revisit this because this movie came out in 2009, and I really want to speak on that particular year because there's some stuff that probably did not help this movie in terms of some people's enjoyment. Now, granted, there are issues, but revisiting, I gotta say, it kind of gives me the same vibes as the first Fantastic Four movie and uh uh the original Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. And I'll get to that in the end of the review. But before I continue, please don't forget to smash that like button, share this with your friends who might be interested, and follow me in links in the description below. So now there's a lot of, you know, 80s icons that I was born in 88. So growing up in the 90s, I watched a lot of TV shows and movies, and I, wasn't in deep ingrained in a lot of 80s stuff, but I was still managed to catch reruns on a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily grew up watching when it was on live. Like, say for example, Sanford and Son. I managed to catch reruns of that, growing up on various, channels. But I also managed to catch certain 80s classics like He-Man, Thundercats. I think I've probably seen a lot more Thundercats than in terms of 80s, shows. I think I probably saw more Thundercats than anything else. But clearly Transformers, I think I got into Transformers because of Beast Wars, not because of the OG stuff. But I did see a fair amount of OG stuff later on. And of course, G.I. Joe. Now, G.I. Joe is very low on that totem pole, but I'm familiar just casually with the characters. And of course, people throw around, when, G.I. Joe in terms of like a, not like an insult, but like a compliment to people who is like very like soldier-esque type of attitude, like somebody called them like a Boy Scout or okay Captain America, like or okay GI Joe. It's just like a, like a superlative. I think that would be the term for this, in reference to a person behaving like somebody like a GI Joe character is very like soldier-esque and matter of factly and like, soldier on. And so by proxy, it's the same way like some people like boomers might not have seen or read any comic books, but they will be familiar with like certain characters like Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man because they're so ingrained into the pop culture, or at least into our world, that you'll be hard pressed to know have people not know at least the gist of the origins of somebody like Superman and Batman, even though they probably not read a single of their comics, or probably maybe one time in their youth. This is how I feel when it comes to like G.I. Joe. I'm not really. It's like in the reverse. I'm not really that all familiar with the lore of G.I. Joe, but I got the general gist of it, so I can appreciate and respect that type of '80s icon. It's pretty much action figures is how I got familiar with the characters of the GI Joes. It wasn't until later I realized, at least not too long after I realized they were, action figures, but there was a cartoon series, or at least animated film in the '80s, and then much later, there were comics, obviously. So I have my familiarity with the GI Joe canon. So when the first GI Joe movie came out, directed by Stephen Sommers, a lot of people, I remember, getting really excited. It's like, oh wow, live action GI Joe film. So this is a very star-studded cast. You got Channing Tatum as Conrad Hauser, aka Duke. Dennis Quaid as General Clayton Abernathy, aka Hawk. Adewale Akinnoye Abajayi, probably butchered that last part, as Herschel Dalton, aka Heavy Duty. Rachel Nichols as Shanna M. O'Hara, aka Scarlet. Marlon Wayans as Wallace Weems, aka Ripcord. Ray Park, the great Ray Park, as Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes is probably like the most recognizable, just so because Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow is probably the most recognizable GI Joe characters out of any one of them. Anybody knows these two particular characters, they know, oh, that's GI Joe stuff. It's like, people can pull up like, Batman, oh, that's DC. Someone can pull up Iron Man, oh, that's Marvel. The Snake Eyes is in Storm Shadows in that vein. Saeed Tomoe as Abel Shaz, aka Breaker, which you may not be from, you may not recognize it because after I rewatched this film, I immediately, my brain went back to the third John Wick film, and the person at above the high table, that leader is the same actor. It's kind of wild. I was like, oh my God, is that dude from the high table? Oh my God. I didn't realize I probably just forgot, because, he's probably like a character actor. So it's crazy he's been acting for so long. And the fact that he was in G.I. Joe is kind of wild. Then we got this cover girl model, Carolina Krokova, playing Courtney Krieger. She's literally a model who got casted in this role, but it's kind of butthurt because the fact that she wanted, she was hoping for a bit more action scenes with this character, but didn't turn out that way because, as I was going to point it out right now, she gets killed off, getting into the second act of the film. Then we got like an uncredited cameo with Brandon Fraser. And man, it's like proto Renaissance Brandon Fraser. Right before his whole situation with, his ex-wife, I think. Well, it's been a lot of stuff behind the scenes dealing with, Hollywood and, before he started doing all those crappy movies and then he had to take a break from Hollywood for a while. We didn't appreciate him, but it's kind of fun. It's like to see him. Him and the guy who playing Heavy Duty and the guy who plays Zartan, Cobra character, who's like a master of disguise, all are from the Mummy franchise. Well, at least from Mummy 2. Well, the guy who plays Heavy Duty is from Mummy 2 as one of the red-robed figures helping revive Imhotep. And of course, Arnold Vosloo, who plays Zartan, is Emotep himself, where you got Brandon Fraser, and I guess Brandon Fraser heard that these guys on this film, and he wanted to just be a part of this, so he can just be among his acting the same film as his friends again. So I thought it was pretty dope. Like that's probably why he's uncredited. It was like he playing Geoffrey Stone the Fourth, aka Sergeant Stone, which by the way is like a combination of at least a few characters rolled into one, because he was reportedly was going to play Gung Ho, but they changed it up. But Fraser really wanted to be part of this, so they kind of like brought him in the last minute. So, but I thought it was pretty dope. I remember people like enjoying seeing this guy popping in. It's always fun to see like movies and just random actors just popping in for a brief moment, which you don't you just miss that kind of thing. I don't think many people do that anymore, where they just show up in a scene for no inexplicable reason. It's very rare nowadays, and without nobody leaking something online. We got Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing the Doctor. Christopher Eccleston playing James McCullen, aka Destro. Snaya Miller playing the Baroness. Lee Byung-hun playing Thomas Arasakagi, aka Storm Shadow. And Kevin J. O'Connor as a cameo as Dr. Mindbender. So that was pretty dope, man. So anyway, we get this kind of a setup for Destro, because they kind of mislead you to thinking like, well, not necessarily. If you know about the lore of G.I. Joe, it's not really much of a surprise to you. But when I watched this live action film for the first time, don't think I watched it in the theater. I think I watched it when it came out on DVD when I was a kid. Like I said, was casually familiar with the G.I. Joe characters, but I still came in fresh, so it wasn't like so it caught me by surprise, where they kind of like kind of sort of caught you by surprise on who was the main bad guy, but you knew this guy was going to be a bad guy anyway. So we get a little and here's one of the problems. I think they utilized flashbacks way too much. But here they set up like back in like 17 something France, and we get this ancestor of McCullen, who he comes from a long line of weapons manufacturers, or at least people who sell weapons to people. And you see his ancestor get in trouble for selling to both sides, and he wearing an iron mask as a form of punishment and a warning about this guy who essentially is a traitor with no honor. So fast forward to the present day, where Destro actually kept the mask so to remind him not to get caught. So he's still carrying on that legacy. Anyway, now the modern day McCullen is, rolling out this new weapon, is these nano machines, warheads, where they as soon as they release, they gravitate towards anything that's metal, and so it's eating at a rapid pace, and then hop into anything that's nearby metal, and so on and so on. So, uh, and you have this kill switch where it's like if you release this in like a city where there's tons of metal, then it'll devastate the entire cityscape or country if you let it. But if you wanted to stop from spreading too far, you can just hit a kill switch and it'll stop. So I do want to bring up the fact that some fun facts about this film. Now, in this little meeting, it's like with other military generals and stuff like that. One of the people in the crowd that's supposed to have had a speaking role between him and Hawk, who's also in the theater, was the creator of the G.I. Joe toy line. But they had to cut that for time's sake. But if you're familiar with the guy and you see that wide shot of the little area, you will spot him in the crowd. But I thought that was pretty cool. But also, the director, Steven, a lot of stuff that you see here comes directly from the comics. At least 80 to 90% of the comics, what you see in this film, is what they pretty much adapted, and very little they got from the animated film. There's some stuff here and there, but by and large, it was thought to be a little too out there for G.I. Joe to play out in live action. So they borrowed heavily from comic sources, which I think was the way to go. And as a matter of fact, another fun fact, a lot of the weapons that you see used, aside from firing like blasters or whatever, they're legit weapons that are legit very real. You'll see them, like Snake Eye's sidearm is an actual weapon in real life that can be used. Even with like the Cobra villains, their little seemingly high-tech guns are legit weapons. They just can't fire like blue blaster bolts or anything like that, but the type of gun is a real gun. So and there's a scene with these little, which look like giant action figures, to be frank with you, but this little suits, Ripcord and Duke, where as they run through Paris, were from the comics themselves. There's even like a shot that's like ripped off from a panel from a comic. So I might as well talk about it now before I forget. I think one of the biggest problems with this film, or at least why it wasn't really appreciated, because around this time, this came out in 2009, around this time, at least a year prior, the first Avengers movie came out, and around this time, in the same year, I think the Dark Knight came out. So I think people, at least studios at the time, was trying to get their movies based off of a particular IP, try to make them grounded, and they wasn't embracing the comic bookiness, that's to say, as well as we are, at least some point after, like, maybe, well, the MCU, for the most part, embraced the comic bookiness and wasn't shying away for certain things. But as time went on, we got a little bit more embracing and adapting certain materials and being fine with it. Kind of like with, Ryan Reynolds Deadpool when his mask and having an expression with the eyes. Same thing with like Spider-Man, where embracing what it is. That's why I bring up about Fantastic Four and Spider-Man 3, where at that time people did not care for that. But looking back now, after all these years later, we can like look at it and it's like they was actually pretty faithful to the source material, where most studios, aren't being as faithful. Here and there they are, but like most part they haven't been faithful to like the source material and embracing the world that they are adapting. Now we're looking back at the first Fantastic Four film and Spider-Man 3, you can still see the problems with them, but you can't not say they weren't being faithful to the source material. The first G.I. Joe film is probably closer to the source material than the next two sequels that came after it, because it just got progressively worse. I kind of, like not bother with the next two movies that came after this because it was so bad. But I think this movie, it has issues, don't get me wrong. But I think this is a little bit closer to the faithful adaptation of G.I. Joe as in terms of the lore. And I don't think we probably appreciate it at that time because our mindset, was like on that grounded realism, or tried to blend the two so that way it doesn't seem too campy, or hokey, So I say like if G.I. Joe would have been made right now, it would have been done properly or done faithfully, or at least appreciated more. But after the last two films, I don't know, because like I said, I didn't see them, but they were just well known to being very, very, very bad. So, but I say that, but after the last Transformer movie, which who knows, but hinted at a G.I. Joe crossover, but even though they all are Hasbro, the world of Transformers are way too big where it would not make sense to have G.I. Joes pop up, I won't say randomly, but it's just like sharing the same world. Especially after seeing something as big happen in the last Transformers movie, it wouldn't make any sense for them to just show up when they did not show up when, like, a giant Unicron was about to eat the freaking planet. So I see it might work in a comic book format, but in terms of like a live action, I don't know. Who knows? They could probably make it work. Get depending on like the right director and some right writers. But as I put it out there, I think this movie, deserves maybe another look-see, because I think this director knew his stuff. I don't think he directed the sequels, but I think this guy knew his stuff, and I don't think we gave him like the props that he deserved. That's just me. Anyway, so we meet up with Duke and Ripcord, who works for the U.S. military and is charged of leading this convoy, shipping this warhead to his, designated location. They get ambushed by Cobra, and I love the look of these vehicles because you can expect them to be seen in like a G.I. Joe type of thing, like these underground drill ship things. It's like, it's the 80s. It's like I could definitely see something like that being pulled off in like an 80s type of format, or even a comic or something. It's like, even though the CGI is, very PS2 even for that time, but if they had like the better, maybe the budget wasn't there. I mean, like, but the budget was this. It had like a budget of $175 million at the time, but it came out at the box office at $302 million. So it did still do well. But with the budget that they had, yeah, I think I can see that, the CGI, if something was gonna like, you know, have to take a back seat, I guess the CGI was the necessary sacrifice, I guess. But it's a shame because, like, if they would have tweaked certain things, I'm pretty sure, like, it would have elevated the film a little bit more. But I don't know if people, I'm pretty sure the studios at the time was taking a risk in and of itself. So I doubt they wanted to put more money into the budget than necessary. Because how many people, how many kids these days know anything about G.I. Joe like that? Aside from maybe their parents who showed them toys or something like that at the time. Anyway, so Duke is being recognized by the Baroness, who apparently dated Duke. I think this is just like a unique thing for the film and not an actual part of the G.I. Joe canon, because they gotta force some type of relationship for the main character. Not a lot of people really was thrilled for Channing Tatum to play as Duke. I don't know why. Because Channing Tatum is an alright actor. I can't say he is bad. I can't say he doing something that make him like a stellar A-list actor, per se, and not on the same, like, like Bryan Cranston or anything like that. But like from the stuff I've seen him in, he's alright. He's like a well above average actor. Whereas like I can, like, when I see him and stuff, like, I won't hate it. It's like the fact that I won't hate his performance in anything, is a testament in of itself. It's like, because there's certain actors you just kind of roll your eyes like, oh God, this person really sucks. It's not gonna, because it's kind of like what's a lady who played Alice in the Resident Evil films. Anytime you see her, you kind of roll your eyes like, oh God, I'm not gonna get a good performance from this woman. There's actors like that for people. This guy doesn't give me that feeling. He doesn't accept me as the same way as I would feel when I see somebody like Keanu Reeves in something. It's like, oh wow, I'm gonna get something great with this guy. Or he also doesn't give me the same negative feelings if I see something like Mila Kunis. I can never pronounce her freaking name, but the Alice character from Resident Evil. It's like, I kind of groan when I see her in anything. But he is right in the middle, at least well above average. So it's like, I'm usually happy when I see him in stuff. But there's a few people who do not like him as Duke. But I guess he does come across like a Duke if he was like a frat boy just coming out of college, getting into the military. Maybe that's what's throwing people off. But honestly, from what I hear, where in the sequel where The Rock replaced the actor for Duke, wasn't any better. It's just another Rock movie, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, did G.I. Joes show up in the nick of time while to help Ripcord and Duke protect the warheads. So Baroness and the other Cobra commandos go, and they all meet up to at the G.I. Joe headquarters. And we got like awesome, just like Ray Park doesn't even have to say any lines outside of Toad from the X-Men film. He just always puts off a great performance, even though he might not have speaking roles. It's insane how good he is at a lot of stuff. As a matter of fact, God, in terms of Ray Park characters, people should do like a tier list of all the Ray Park performances. Because, matter of fact, that is a good idea. It's like, in terms of actors, you know, like, but that's going to be like a lot. Because I'm thinking like, man, like somewhere like voice actors, like Tara Strong, she has like a lot of voice credits. So it's going to be too much in terms of like making a tier list. But like, we do like a tier list of Ray Park performances, because I'm pretty sure Darth Maul is probably S tier, and I probably would put like Snake Eyes maybe A, and Toad I probably bring it down to maybe a C plus, because I didn't hate the character. He was just fun. It just didn't have that much screen time. But you also got that stupid. He also, well, his lines ain't terrible up until the point of like, the whole storm scene. Anyway, they, for some apparent reason, this kind of confused me. It's like he sees like what with Duke, and is getting familiar with the Joes, and he just like notices they all come from like different types of nationalities in this particular group, and he telling like just randomly, he's like, this is like a unique outfit, and I want in. They all look at each other like, bruh. And it's like, didn't you just lose a bunch of your own fellow soldiers in that firefight? You don't seem that too broken up about it. I mean, he saved his partner Ripcord, so. But I love the whole lines, because you get the classic G.I. Joe lines, like, knowing it's after battle, go Joe, or yo Joe. But you also get the line from Ripcord when he talks about Duke, like, he's government issued, GI, government issued, and makes an offhanded comment about Duke having a kung fu grip. This is, a joke about the toy lines with action figures having kung fu grips. I don't know if the G.I. Joe action figure started that particular, gimmick with a kung fu grip or not. But if it is, that's kind of fun. But anyway, they meet up with Hawk, who tells them, like, you don't ask to join G.I. Joe, we ask you, kind of thing. But when they come to realize that Duke is familiar with the Baroness, it offers his, knowledge about the whole situation, they agree to start, going through like a small little quick training session with them to test them, to get them ready, like, to be part of their little outfit. And it's like, as after when like they speak with McCollum with these holograms, which the holograms part is kind of dope. Of course, like in other movies where introduce like holograms and stuff, they get a little bit better, but this is actually pretty solid. But you see, like, McCullen is working with Storm Shadow and has like a thing with the Baroness and stuff like that. So he contacts Hawk, who gives them the codes necessary to open the warheads to make sure everything's okay. But he secretly also reignited the beacon, so that way Storm Shadow and the Baroness could track where their hideout is. But while they're on their way, essentially, I don't know, this is like hours or maybe like a day of them just doing this training montage, and it's like, do y'all have time for this? Training is like y'all got like, weeks to train to be top notch, prepared for G.I. Joe. And it's like you got Duke trying to train with Snake Eyes. And it's like, okay, it's like, I'm not saying I'm not posing, because I'm pretty sure it's the next level training for any new recruits for G.I. Joe program. But it's like I don't know. That's too much time probably needed in order to be able to be like, okay, you're ready, kind of thing. But I guess it's like, since they already trained military personnel, they can like get up there. But it's like, how many of these other people, these other soldiers here are probably a little bit, waiting in line to be rise up to the rank to be part of this little A squad of Joes with snake eyes and heavy duty and stuff like that. But they just like cut front of the line, kind of such. I don't know. Like I'm just kind of rambling right now. So we get this little thing with Ripcord trying to hit on Scarlet, and cause they got a thing for each other, but it's not one way to look at it is kind of charming because it's Marlon Wayans, and she's like more. He wears his heart on his sleeve while she's kind of very analytical, but it's kind of like this whole opposites attract kind of situation. I thought I'd bring it up. It's not really that all important, but you need like a whole love connection thing and these kind of things every once in a while. But oh no, it's fun. It's fine. But the Baroness and Storm Shadow break in along with I keep want to call him Emotep, and that's not who he is. Zartan. Break in, kill Cover Girl, and wounds Hawk, so that way they can use his visual identification to open the safe where the warheads are so they can make their escape. But he hits the security alarm, so there's a fight breakout. It's kind of cool scenes, even though there's crazy explosions. It's an action film at the end of the day. So it's supposed to go off. We see Baroness and Scarlet, fight hand to hand. It's cool. Behind the scenes, I forget which one, but I'm pretty sure it's the lady who plays the Baroness. In that particular scene, she got burnt. Her hand got burnt on something, and the woman who plays Scarlet got, I think, an ankle twisted or a wrist twisted or something like that. In this particular fight scene between the two, there's another little fact that I found out. It's not nothing, but it's always stuck in my, when I hear about injuries, it's always sticking in my mind when I find it out behind the thing. So they escape with the warheads, and that's when Ripcord of all people, just now I question how he just be able to kind of take a wild guess without nothing, like any type of breadcrumbs leading up to his conclusion. He just flat out says like, hey, maybe when we turned on the, use the codes, they turn on like a beacon so that way they can easily track us here. And it's like, is there a scene that was missed to have him lead up to that obvious, I don't want to say obvious, but that kind of conclusion where it's like, yeah, we, the audience, know that happened, but it's like, you kind of feel like you took a guess at it and you just happen to guess right. But anyway, they realize, Destro is, part of, these enemies. And so they, plan on using the warheads in Paris. Just when they use facial recognition to find where in the world has the Baroness been in public. And it turns out she's, married to this Baron who is also a scientist that they plan on using to activate these warheads. At least one of them. uh, Storm Shadow ends up killing him, and uh, uh, the Joes made their way in Paris to stop him from activating one of the warheads on the Eiffel Tower. You get this, I gotta honestly say, a cool, aside from the crappy CGI, kind of cool scenes, car chasing. And all these cars are blowing up and everything like that. Had a record of its own at the time for the most cars destroyed in the film, or flipped, or something like that. You can easily look this up. They had a record at that time. And it's just like a fun scene where, like, Snake Eyes is on top of Storm Shadow's vehicle, and they're trying to keep close so they can try to get to the machine on the Baroness to deactivate the warheads before they let it loose. And then, of course, using those like robotic suits, which, by the way, do they only have 2 of those? Why not more of the Joes or their, grunt people utilizing these things? But, Heavy Duty points out it's like they're $1 million a piece. So I guess they can't just willy-nilly make these things en masse, but they are highly useful. It's not like they may have adamantium, but it's a fun little moment where they're just chasing down this car. And then, of course, they, give foot chase. And Storm Shadow managed to launch one at the Eiffel Tower, just crippling it a bit before Duke manages to jump on their helicopter and hit the button on the Baroness's belt to deactivate it before it caused mass catastrophe in Paris. But he gets captured, and the Paris police end up capturing all the Joes except for Snake Eyes, who reconnects with Hawk to get them released. But he mentions that because of this whole ordeal, they're not allowed back in Paris ever again. They're pretty much banned from ever setting foot in Paris ever again. And they're due back to their respective native countries. But before that, Hawk, gets them on a trip to save Duke. And thanks to Duke's quick thinking, he manages to get his hands on the briefcase with the rest of the warheads to reactivate the code so the homing beacon can activate. So that's way they can track down their hideout, which is like a snowy ice cap area. But the Cobra bad guys let off the 2 warheads. One, well, there's supposed to be 3 missiles. One going to Washington. Well, one going to Washington, one goes to Beijing, and the other goes to Moscow. Snake Eyes managed to take down one using a rocket, but there's one going to Moscow and one going to DC. Now, all the while behind the scenes, Zartan is, fulfilling another layer plan by Destro and the others, and the Doctor, who impersonates the President of the United States, obviously kills him off, and it was, I'm imagining, leads into the sequel that didn't turn out so good. But I just thought I'd point that out because I'm not going to revisit it. It's supposed to have been like a huge franchise, but the pieces weren't all there, or at least people weren't supportive, and in combination, the studios wasn't given like the necessary backing or the belief behind this being successful, or like the necessary components needed for it to be successful. But Snake Eyes breaks in and tangles with Storm Shadow, takes him out. But you get these, like I said, these random flashbacks with Duke and Baroness and her brother Rex in their younger years, uh, and him proposing to her. But then she made a promise to look after her little brother. But the brother turns out to be the doctor, who also turns out to be Cobra Commander, and he in a bunker that's about to blow up meets up with Mindbender, who you see like the chemical things that they're utilizing to uh on like Zartan and the other grunts and stuff like that that are using that in their little schemes. But he still got injured and everything like that. It took me a long time to realize that was Joseph Gordon-Levitt, honestly, because he was still like an up and coming star at that time. And of course, they didn't have him wear like the classic Cobra Commander hood because it looked like a Ku Klux Klan type of hood, even though it wasn't white. It was like a bluish purple kind of color, but they want to take the risk. And I think there's like a smart play because that probably wouldn't be a good look. So they went with this kind of like metal dome kind of thing, which it's fine. It's not like Cobra Commander, but for what it's worth, I think it's fine. It's not atrocious. But then like they realized that the Baroness, was under the control of her brother the whole time, and that's why she was doing this kind of wicked stuff that seems very odd to Duke this whole time. But she managed to regain control after she sees her former lover getting hurt by the bad guys and kind of unlocked the memory. Didn't really. I guess it kind of like throughout since the first scene we saw her, she has these little moments of flashbacks bit by bit. Every time she sees this guy from her time with him is so strong, it gets kind of overpowered the little mind control chemicals. Which they took some liberties because I don't think the Baroness and Cobra Commander are related at all. Yeah, I think this is just in the movie they're actually related. But thanks to Ripcord, who utilized one of the extra ships from the Cobra base, flies in the atmosphere and takes down the two warheads, and he ends up getting he parachutes towards the White House lawn and gets arrested by his Secret Service. But he manages to save both Moscow and DC. And then they managed to capture Cobra Commander and Zartan, who got injured in like a firefight. His face got like, melted a bit, and then got like third-degree burns or second-degree burns or something like that. And then Cobra Commander gives him the some the chemicals, and it kind of warped his face to that metal visage, and he just immediately just reminded himself about like, now I truly am part of the long line of Mercalos. And the CGI is still kind of rough. Like I said, if they had like a bit more money for the budget, I'm pretty sure they can tweak certain things with the CGI. But they end up getting captured, and uh, the Baroness is supposed to get like hopefully fixed up so she can get back to her normal self. And like I said, like Vestro is, laying out further plans for Cobra Commander for a bigger game plan. But yeah, but that's where the movie ends. Like I said, I mean, aside from like the CGI and other stuff that I pointed out that seems kind of like a little off, this honestly, I argue, is probably the most faithful out of the 3 films that they had. This probably is the most faithful to the G.I. Joe lore, because the director explicitly took like inspiration from comic source material rather than like the 80s animated stuff. So yeah, like I said, if it was made today, I think it'd been a little bit more embraced. And I think with all the IPs and everything like that, the studios will probably be a little bit more forthcoming with like, make it as much G.I. Joe stuff as you possibly can, right out of the animated stuff or right out of the comics, like, take our money, make it happen kind of thing, with a little bit more faith than they probably did back in the day. But anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts. But it was still kind of fun. It was just a fun, just action romp. Like I said, but I ain't gonna like check out the sequels. Like, I know they're just hot garbage. At least by comparison to this. But anyway, I will see you guys in a few minutes as I will go over the full review of season 2 of Batman Beyond. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all soon. Yo, Joe.